So how did you get into hardcore? Like, how does this happen for you? What
For
was like your
me,
gateway band?
gateway band. What's the gateway? It was definitely skateboarding and like Thrasher magazine, and I can't really remember if it was like the Ramones or the Sex Pistols or see, I never really saw the Clash as these punk rockers, but it was either the Ramones or the Sex Pistols, and also I never really I like the Clash, but I didn't really appreciate them as what they are until way later. Um, so I would say Ramones, Sex Pistols, and then getting Thrasher magazine and looking through Thrasher magazine and seeing like either like what records were being reviewed or there was ads for, so that led to like suicidal tendencies. And my friend John, and I can't remember his last name for the life of me, but he was like one of my skate buddies. He had an older brother that was 3 or 4 years older than us that was into like, I want to
Don't
say
forget,
that.
don't forget to sit back just a little bit.
Oh, oh
I
yeah,
just don't want your head.
yeah.
No, you don't have to sit back all the way. I just don't want your face to be cut off.
I was getting excited about talking about
Oh yeah, of course, of course,
yeah,
of course.
yeah. So his brother, I don't remember his brother's name either, but he was a little bit older, and he was into a lot of like the generic punk, like, but that led into, but like, you know, he had like a 7 Seconds shirt, and I saw like, that the Walk Together, Rock Together record in his collection, like, oh, and there was like a little, but so he had like that level, like the popular level, but so like that stuff, but there was also like something that I remember he played us was DI and the Adolescents, and I really loved that. I thought that was like really cool and like catchy, and the lyrics were quirky and like whatever, like Richard hung himself, it's that was like, and then he showed us Suburbia. So and he and his friends did a funny thing a few times to me and him, like he'd be like, oh, you want to go see this show? And I can see the flyer for the shows, but there was like, I 7 Seconds and the Circle Jerks, and I think like the Mags opened, and like this was like, and we were like 14, and we were waiting with our skateboards, and like, we'll come take you, and we just never got picked up, like, sorry, our other friends wanted, and that happened like a few times to some legendary like older shows that I would have been super young at, we would have been like children at, and he ended up like taking us to a show at the Right Track Inn, um, a few years later, like when I was like of age, and that's kind of when that was like my first show. But like even before that, I kind of want to say that another older friend in high school, like it was like, oh, you skate, and like we skated, so we had that connection. And then I had my headphones on, my Walkman, and like an older this dude Kevin, who's like, comes up, he's like, what are you listening to? And I opened it up, and it was again probably like the Sex Pistols or the Ramones, and he's like, you like this? And he like gives me a tape, and it was the Age of Quarrel demo on one side and the Roar Bad Brains cassette on the other. And I put on the Bad Brains first and listened to like the first like 30 seconds of it, and I was like, oh, what the, yeah, okay, yeah. And I was like, okay, instant, like this is like fully straight in. And that, so, and then that tape I listened to back to back over and over and over again. A few days later, he's like, what'd you think of that tape? I was like, it's amazing. And then and by this point too, like I probably have heard like Minor Threat, so like things were starting to like click, and like all those bands that like 7 Seconds, and the more of those kind of style bands I definitely was gravitating towards, and Minor Threat, and I knew Bad Brains were, but I didn't hear that yet because it's like you just couldn't go. Hey, you had to go and find it. And Chromags, I had no idea, or that was like something that I never, that was something totally, off the radar at that point. And and I kind of realized this also a little bit later on in life, that he came to me like pretty like confident. He was like, "Oh, you like this music?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, like on like Sundays at CBGB's, like these bands play." And it's like, "Oh, cool." He's like, "We can go." And I was like, he's like, "You're 16, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm 16." Yeah, I'm 16. And I was like not 16. I was like 15. and and then somehow he ended up getting a job at Dutch East Trading, which was like the East Coast independent like record, and they did like giant records. So you know
Yeah,
exactly what I'm talking about.
like were like the label for well, it was no, I'm sorry, it was like Cargo, but like Dutch East, I think was like who Wishing Well went through initially before they ended up signing Giant and all that stuff.
Something like, yeah. So but that was like literally in the town next to me, that little warehouse. It was like, so he ended up getting a job in that warehouse and met a few other like kind of like local kids that were just kind of figuring it out. Also had like an older brother that was kind of tapped in and understood. So, and then that was like probably like in like 3 or 4 months, like it was like New York hardcore, and that was like 1987, middle 1987, starting into 1988. So that's kind of when everything was like